It's very much my honor to present Stephen Pilaya.
Yes, very good.
Ooh, I took 3 turns, but I got it right. Who is visiting us from Open University in the UK, overseas. Ooh. Stephen has a pronounced British accent, so be careful and be a sympathetic audience and try to work through it. Stephen is a linguist. He's pursuing his PhD in linguistics and has a very interesting project. And I'm particularly happy to have Stephen here because we haven't had anybody in linguistics really who's interested in religion speak for ever since I've been here anyway. And it's terribly important. We talk a lot about texts and about investigating texts, but Stephen's investigating oral texts as a linguist, and so it brings a different set of tools to bear, which I think are really going to be fascinating. So without further ado, Stephen will be talking to us about antagonism in Christian atheist YouTube interaction.
All right, thank you very much, Peter. So can you understand my accent?
You know, of course, that Americans preserve the British accent of the 18th century much better than the Brits did.
I think the point is that I'm doing a good job of pretending to be a native. Actually, the truth is actually that I'm not British. So if you were expecting to hear a British person speak, you're free to go now. It might reflect poorly on you, though, if you leave right now. No, I'm actually originally from the U.S. I'm from the Chicago area, but I have been in England now for 3 years. Doing my PhD there in applied linguistics. I did a Master of Research before that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that project as well. But in the UK, the PhD program is a 3-year program. It's in the US, it can be longer, I think 5, 10, 15 years.
You have 2 Chicago people here, so yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. It can be a long thing. In the UK, it's 3 or 4 years. It should be 3 though. So the point being is that I'm getting to the end of my writing up, and I'll begin working on my thesis in the next couple of months, hopefully. So I want to talk a little bit about the kind of research that I'm doing. I look at interaction between atheists and Christians on YouTube. I know probably everyone is familiar with YouTube. These are the kind of videos that you might be less familiar with. I don't know, we'll see. I've been surprised in some of the people who can end up being familiar with the people that I'm looking at online. Maybe they're people that you've seen before. But I'm interested in atheists and Christians arguing with each other. And as Peter said, because I'm interested in language, I'm interested in how they use language and how language contributes to how they understand and misunderstand each other. So the presentation I'm going to give today is going to be mostly about the interaction between a particular group of people about a particular issue, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But first, I kind of want to hopefully convince you that the kind of research that I'm doing is valuable and it's a useful thing to look at. And then I'll show you a little bit of the analysis that I'm doing. And hopefully by that point you'll be very convinced that what I'm doing is interesting and useful. So most people are interested or know something about YouTube. Like I said, I did a Master of Research where I was looking at interaction between atheists and Christians. In these 2 particular people, actually, an atheist and a Christian user. Let's see if you can guess by their username which one is the Christian and which one is the atheist. Okay. This one's name is JesusFreak777. This one's name is Fake Sagan. Fake Sagan's maybe a little bit more difficult to get, but JesusFreak777 sort of tips his hat, right? They were having an argument between the 2 of them, and the argument it went on for quite a long time. But at the end of the argument, Fake Sagan here called Jesus Freak. He said, "You think you're the Pope of YouTube. You're acting like the Pope of YouTube," which is sort of this funny way of referring to somebody else, also insulting as well. What do you think the Pope of YouTube means? I'm sorry, in my presentation, I'd like to have some interaction, particularly because my throat is a little bit dry. So let's get some responses. What do you think the Pope of YouTube means? When you hear that metaphor, what do you think Pope of YouTube means? Don't be shy. Please don't be shy.
Speaking for the whole Christian YouTube
Okay, speaking for the whole Christian YouTube community, okay. Any other ideas? That's it? Anyone else have any other ideas? Does Pope have a sense of being authoritative to anyone? Okay, good. I think there was a sense, that he was speaking for all Christians in an authoritative way, and not only all Christians, but everybody else on YouTube. He was telling them that you shouldn't behave as though you have this religious authority that actually you don't have. And so he used this term, Pope of YouTube. And it was interesting as they were talking about it, suddenly this metaphor, Pope of YouTube, they started talking about the term Pope of YouTube. And the whole argument became about Pope of YouTube and actually wasn't about what they had started with arguing about, which was actually stem cell research. Quite an important issue. But they ended up arguing about whether or not Jesus Freak was a Pope of YouTube. And I thought to myself, something interesting is happening around metaphor here, because Pope of YouTube, it's not really a clear term, right? There is no real Pope of YouTube, right? Something that the one person had made up, and it got to be a part of their misunderstanding. So I was interested in the Christians and the atheists arguing with each other, and I was noticing actually that over the course of time, you would have arguments that would arise, and then you'd have groups of people who would come together on different sides of the argument. And I originally thought that it was going to be like atheists on one side and Christians on the other side, but actually it wasn't always the case that was what was happening. It wasn't always just Christians versus atheists. Sometimes you would have the Christians arguing against the Christians, and I became really interested in how these groups were forming, particularly around the issue of YouTube drama. So when there was an argument like there was around Pope of YouTube, how did these groups of people come together and decide, well, I'm with this person and not with that person? I don't know, has anyone heard of the term YouTube drama before? You've heard of this internet drama? It's this sort of interpersonal arguments that happen, that come up on the internet, where people are arguing with each other, not about substantive things like stem cell research, but about things like who said what about whom, like he said, she said, these sorts of things. And I came to think that actually drama is an opportunity for people to sort of show their affiliation, show who they're affiliated with. Who are your friends and who are your enemies? So whenever there's an argument, oh, I'm with this person and not with that person, okay? And going back then to the issue where I was looking at the language and looking at metaphor, I was wondering to myself, maybe metaphor is an important part of how this is happening. And I have this all-important thing called a research question. Now, all of you are undergraduates, and you're moving, I think, the goal of undergraduate study, I think, is to move from somebody telling you what the answer is to moving to a place where you're able to find out the answers for yourself, right? And you're trying to get the tools so you can ask the right question and get the answers that you need. This is a question that I'm really interested in, that I don't think that there's actually an answer for yet that somebody can tell me. It's how does metaphor use contribute to the emergence of user groups on YouTube? So what role does metaphor play in these arguments that people are having with how people understand and how people misunderstand each other, okay? So this is the question that I have. This is what I want to figure out. But now I need to have some tools to help me figure that out, okay? Because nobody can tell me what the answer is. I have to find some way to get the answer myself. And in research, we call these methods, right? Your methods of research. And I'm using two methods of particular research. The first one is called, this whole circle would represent discourse-centered online ethnography. Discourse-centered online ethnography. Has anyone heard of the term ethnography before? You're interested? Okay, so everyone knows what ethnography is. Yannis Anthopoulos is a professor at the University of Hamburg, and his idea is when you look at internet web pages, right, you have sort of an artifact of something, right? But it's always changing, it's always moving, because internet web pages can be changed all the time. People can add things and subtract things. And so his idea is that if you're going to look at a web page, if you're going to do research about a web page, you need to watch it for a period of time. because it changes, right? What you have one day is not what you see the next day. If you want to do research on the Yahoo homepage, and you only take the Yahoo homepage at one time, well, the next day it's going to be different, right? You can't really find out anything about it unless you watch it over time. Not only that, but people interacting on web pages change over time too. So if you're interested in people interacting on YouTube, you have to watch the same people for a while to kind of be able to understand that one web page in the context of all the interactions. That makes sense. So you can't just look at one video and pull it out and say, well, this means something. You have to understand it in the context of people interacting with each other. And Giannis also looks at, he does interviews with people as well. I haven't done much interviewing in my research. I haven't been very successful at that. But I've been doing the longitudinal observation of the same group over 2 years. Anyway, the other element to this is discourse centered online ethnography. It's not just that watching of the web page, but what Ambrosopoulos says is the next step to it is to take the language out of it, the language on the website, and do analysis of the language. And so I'm doing metaphor analysis of the language. I'm looking at the different metaphors that people use in their interaction. That's the part of the conversation that I'm interested in, okay? So my question and my tools for answering my question, and this is what I'm doing my PhD study on, essentially. So I was interested in how metaphor in these drama interactions, how it contributes to people having different groups. So I had to go out and find a drama episode, sometime where some people were arguing about something. So before, people were arguing about the Pope of YouTube. In this drama episode that I'm looking at, people are arguing about the term human garbage. Have you heard the term human garbage before? No? If I said the term human garbage was in the Bible, would this surprise you? Yes? Well, the question wasn't not it's in the Bible, it's really what they're arguing about. But what happened in this sort of drama episode, we have, again, 2 users, a Christian and an atheist user. You can't really tell by their usernames, unfortunately, who's whom. This is Yokup and this is Croesusborg. Maybe you can tell. Anyway, Croesusborg and Yokup were arguing with each other, and Yokup got really, really upset. Yokup is the one on the left here. He called Croesusborg human garbage. He said, "You're human garbage." And not only did he call him human garbage, but he said that actually this term, that not the exact words were in the Bible, but that the idea was in the Bible. And I'll get to where he takes that from in a second here. But within this argument where they were arguing about human garbage, as I told you, I was interested in the groups that were emerging. It seemed like that sort of 3 groups, 3 positions were happening within this argument. First of all, there were some people, this is another atheist user who said, oh, you should never call anyone human garbage, that's bad behavior, right? That was one position that people were taking. There was another interesting position that was being taken by Christian users, which wasn't that necessarily you shouldn't call people human garbage. They were saying, you're reading the Bible in the wrong way. You have a bad interpretation of the Bible. Actually, the Bible doesn't really say that. It says something else. This was another group of people. And then there were some people who were saying, good job, Yokup, calling people human garbage is not only the right thing to do, but you're right, the Bible does say that. That was right behavior and the right interpretation. Human garbage is also a metaphor, right? What does it mean to be human garbage exactly? Well, we're going to talk about that as it sort of bounced around. So I was looking at a set of videos. This is kind of the main group of videos that I'm looking at. It started off with this video that Yokup made called Human Garbage Are You? Which he took down after he made it, right? It was very offensive, and people were very offended by it. And then there were a couple of different sets of responses. This was an atheist response. I'll show you a little bit of this video. After he took down this video, Yokup came back and basically said the same thing again and again and again and again. A little bit nicer, though. He didn't say it as an insult. He was just saying, well, this is just the interpretation of Scripture. and did it more as a kind of, it's not me saying it, it's the Bible saying it. Whereas when he initially said it, it was more of an insult. And then there were other people, like I said, who said, actually, by the way, John 15 for dummies, unbelievers are human garbage? Question mark. He obviously doesn't agree with Jacob's interpretation, and I'll show you a little bit of that video as well. But this is what happened. The video started in January of this is 2009, actually. This would have been the end of 2008, 2009. And people were still talking about it a year and a half later, actually. It was a very, very enduring term. Not enduring. Enduring term. It does sort of catch in the mind, right? Human garbage. Okay. I want to talk first about the term human garbage and how people interacted with that term. It's really, really important when you're looking at how metaphor is used in conversation. It's not just the metaphor that I use. It's like the Pope of YouTube. One person used it, and then another person used it, and the meaning was sort of negotiated between them. And I'm interested in how that happened in this episode of Human Drama as well, how metaphor came out of the scripture for this one person and how other people interacted with it. So let's do a refresher course on John 15. I don't know if anybody's familiar with John 15, this parable. I'll let you read it as opposed to me reading it out loud. I'll sort of point to the main parts. In this story, this parable that Jesus tells, Jesus is a vine, and his followers are the branches coming out of the vine. And God is the Father. God is also the gardener, and God comes off. And if there are some good branches and some bad branches, God comes by and cuts off the bad branches. If you look at verse 6 here, if you do not remain with me, you are a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. Okay, so again, think about the image. You've got Jesus as the vine, followers as the branches. God comes by, bad branch, cuts it off, picks it up, throws it in the fire. Okay, good branch, bearing fruit coming out of that branch. God cuts off the bad bits of it and more fruit comes out. That's the story. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? How do you get human garbage from this? Do you see human garbage here at all? Where do you see human garbage?
The concept of being thrown away.
The concept of being thrown away. So something about being thrown away. Again, metaphor linking to metaphor. You throw away withered branches, you throw away garbage. Okay, that's where the linking is happening. Any other words that connect with garbage? Yeah, go ahead.
Withers.
Okay, withers.
As in something decomposing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, withered branches decompose, garbage decomposes as well. Anyone else see another one? Yeah, go ahead.
Like above the sense of not belonging.
Okay, so the sense of not belonging. So things that don't belong are garbage. Things that do belong are not garbage. Okay, interesting. Anybody else? There's one here, one more, the one that Jacob actually made. Go ahead.
The garbage disposal.
Throwing
it away.
Okay, so garbage disposal, burning. We actually in the U.S. don't burn much garbage here, do we? We usually have landfills. I lived in Japan for a time, and in Japan people burn garbage. It's very important, right, that you have what you can burn and what you can't burn. So this is actually, for this video that Jacob made, that's the main part of it, right? If you are not connected, you cannot bear fruit. If you don't bear fruit, God prunes you. You wither in a pile. You're burned. You're garbage. You're garbage. He makes a connection right here. Okay, look at this. If you look at this, you have in the text connected. That's a metaphor from the text. Fruit connected in the text. Bear fruit also in the text. God prunes you in the text. Wither in a pile in the text. You are burned in the text. You're garbage, not in the text. But can you tell that from what he says here? He doesn't ever say, oh, the Bible says X, Y, and Z, and then I say this other thing. Now the way he talks about it is just like this. Okay? I was going to show you this video as well. And last week, actually I had a presentation last week where I was going to show this video, and I went up and I found out that actually Jakob has been taken off of YouTube, so his account has been suspended, so I can't actually show you the video anymore. You have to take my word for my transcription here. But so this is what he says. What's interesting to me now, and this is an atheist responding to Jakob, okay? This is what he says about what Jakob says, and I'm going to play a little bit of the video for you. And he's talking here about what Jakob says, okay? He's making a comment on what Jakob says, and we should be able to hear. Do I want it to be blinking, Peter, or not blinking?
No, hit the video mute now.
Okay, that should be okay.
Yeah, it should be fine. You have the volume
Okay.
up. Yeah.
All right, let's listen to this. So I wanted to say one more thing to warn you. I think he uses a bad word in this as well. So as I warned you before, I have this problem sometimes. If I don't warn people, then someone will say, I don't think this actually happened to me before, but I have had people come up to me and say, I wasn't offended by it, but in the future you should say, and so if you're offended, you're free to go now. If not, it's not too bad. I think it'd be okay.
And let's make no bones about it. This Jakob video, that's what he does. He calls gays and lesbians, atheists, agnostics, pretty much anybody that doesn't subscribe to or live up to the standards of his particular brand of religion. He calls them human garbage. Just coming right out there saying it there. Human garbage dumps, human garbage piles. And before you go and make an angry comment on his video, not to dissuade you from doing that, because he certainly deserves them, but just know that he backs that up with scripture all the way. And I'll let you go watch his video. I'm not going to rehash the whole fucking scriptural, but just let it be known that those words are right there in the Bible. Human garbage.
Ooh, interesting what happened here. He calls them human garbage. Human garbage, this is another thing that Jakob said. He's repeating these things word for word. He was talking about atheists and gays and lesbians in this particular image, in this particular video. But look at this. Let it be known that those words are right there in the Bible, human garbage. So the way that Jakob said it gave this user, Paul's ego, the impression that those words actually were in the Bible. Clearly those words aren't actually in the Bible, but the way that he said it, the way that he used the metaphor, has convinced Paul's ego that they're actually in the Bible. It's really interesting. Now let's look at another response to it from this is a Christian user named Christopher L. Like I said before, there were some people who were arguing that he had the wrong interpretation of it. Remember this video was called John 15 for Dummies. And I want you to think about what he's doing. He's doing something very different than Paul's ego was doing. But let's look at what he says about Jakob's interpretation, or Jakob's use of human garbage.
This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. Jesus is the vine, and his followers are the branches. If we remain in him, we will bear much fruit, but without him we can do nothing. We are fruitless. If we do not remain in him, we are thrown away and wither, only to be burnt up. Now, really, the key here is remaining in him. An unbeliever is never in him. Only a believer can be considered in him. And only a believer can remain in him, as an unbeliever cannot remain where he has never been. John 15:9-17 says,
Okay, I'll stop it right there. So the point that Christopher L. is making is a different one. It's not that human garbage isn't in the Bible. It's saying that the metaphor is unbelievers are human garbage. He's saying that there's a problem with that. The problem isn't with human garbage necessarily. It's with that other half of the metaphor, who's on the other side of it. So it's not that unbelievers are human garbage. The problem is that an unbeliever in the world of the metaphor doesn't work, right? Because the people who remain in God, or remain in the vine, don't remain in the vine, are only believers. So the problem with unbelievers are human garbage is actually people who were at one time in the vine and then not in the vine again. Those people are human garbage. That's an okay interpretation of it. But to say unbelievers are human garbage, that's the problem. What I think is interesting here is that, first of all, the biblical text has power. So for Jakob, when he says that the Bible says something, that has a lot of power, right? It's very important that the Bible says something or doesn't say another thing. Not only is that, when he expands that metaphor, he extends that metaphor, it's not only that he's extending the metaphor, but he's taking that power with it, right? So he's moving from what the Bible says to what Jacob interprets the Bible saying, and with that interpretation comes the power, or the implied power of what the Bible says. And not only that, so he's got his interpretation with what he perceives as power with it. Other people are now confused about what's actually in the Bible and what's actually not in the Bible because of the mixing of the different metaphors. That was one response to human garbage. This is another one that I want to talk about, is the story of the Titanic. How does the story of the Titanic relate to human garbage? Well, this one user, Phil Helene, I was telling you earlier about the atheist response to it. This was another atheist response to it. And he said, Jacob is a psychopath. There's another new interesting metaphor. Jacob is a psychopath. He made a different association with the word burning and human garbage. So you're talking about human garbage piles is what Jacob said at one point. Burning. Does this give you another image that you can think of? What else does that relate to? Humans burning. Holocaust, right? It accesses that part. If you take humans plus burning, there's something in our mind that goes, the most sort of strong image, the strongest image we have of that is the Holocaust, burning bodies, right? Jacob didn't initially say that at all. He didn't talk about the Holocaust at all. But for this person, burning plus human bodies equals the Holocaust, and the Holocaust is something that was done by psychopaths. So Jacob is a psychopath. That's sort of where that line of thinking went. And not only is Jacob a psychopath, but this person is going to respond by telling their own metaphorical story about Jacob. Okay. In this video clip, this is Phil. He uses the name of another user called Gear Up. So if you hear the term Gear Up, it's another user. It's not important to the story, but that's who he's talking about. Another user named Gear Up. Let's listen to what he says here.
My temper's subsided a little now. You're a monster. I once made a joke that if I was the captain of the Titanic, and it was a choice between, I think it was Gear Up that I used the analogy with. If it was a choice between Gear Up and a puppy, nobody had to worry about the puppy. But after hearing this video, in all sincerity, the puppy would survive, and you would have to be the best swimmer that the world has ever seen to survive, Yoko. And I mean it. I'd save a puppy before you. And anyone on the lifeboat who wanted to complain, they can complain all their life. I'll have no problem. I won't lose a moment's sleep.
Okay. He tells a different kind of metaphorical story here about being on the Titanic. Here's Gear Up. It's funny in this framing of the issues. He's going to tell a story about Jacob. He uses the word analogy here, but he starts by calling it a joke. But he's not telling it in a very joking way, right? I mean, it doesn't sound like he's joking about it. He sounds pretty serious, right? It's very important, though, I think, that he frames it as a joke. It's not a serious thing that he's saying. It's a joke, an analogy. Here's the analogy, right? You're on the deck of the Titanic. You've got Phil Helene, the captain's hat. He's standing there with Jacob and a puppy. He's got to choose between one or the other because there's only one seat in the lifeboat. And he doesn't say who he's going to choose. Oh, he does say who he's going to choose. He says he's going to save the puppy and that Jacob's going to have to be the best swimmer the world has ever seen. And he's going to have no problem with it, okay? In this metaphorical story, there's a couple of different elements. You have Jacob and Phil Helene. They're on a ship, the Titanic. There's one seat left in the lifeboat, and there's a puppy. There's also people in the lifeboat. I missed that in my list here. There's people in the lifeboat who can complain about it or complain about the choice. And in this story, there's this metaphorical, this ethical question that's essentially put in the story. It's what is the value of the relative value of a hateful person's life? What's the value of Jacob's life? So Phil makes this story. He tells this story within a video. It's just a very small part of the video. I played it all for you. On this video, there's 613 comments. A lot of people responding to what Phil has said, but people are also really interested in this story, right? It's a very interesting story that people want to comment on. I'll show you some of the comments here. The first comment I want to show you is this one. He says, person says, I would choose the man, but the moment he started saying anything like "thank God" or started preaching in the boat, I would tell him to thank the rubber raft he was in and probably kick him into the water with the yapping dog. Okay? An awful but funny thing to say. It's still, this element of it being joking is still sort of there, but it's a very kind of dark joke. It's important to keep in mind as we go forward why that joking element of this is important. Excellent response, Phil. I, for one, would pick a cute puppy, stupid cat, or flightless bird over Yoka. My only question is, would there be enough cold beer and sandwiches on the lifeboat? So he takes out puppy and puts in these other things, stupid cat or flightless bird. Why stupid cat or flightless bird? What's special about those animals? Yeah.
It kind of takes away their uniqueness.
Okay.
Like the cunning cat and a bird can obviously fly. But Yoko.
Interesting. Okay, it takes away their uniqueness. I was thinking it's sort of a cute puppy that people would think, oh, this is a really easy choice, actually, because you have Yokup, who's really like, nobody likes Yokup, and the cute puppy, well, obviously you would choose a cute puppy, but if you put in stupid cat, well, maybe you would choose Yokup over the stupid cat, or flightless bird. There's something, not valuable about that, so maybe you would choose Yokup then, but the point is that anything is better than Yokup. But I hadn't thought about that yet, about having being the taking away their unique element. That's interesting. I definitely saved the puppy. Yokup's old and has had his chance in life. The puppy is a baby. No way I'm leaving babies on a sinking ship. Besides, having Yokup out of the G-pole is actually doing mankind a favor. There's another thing they're extending the story. So at the end of the Phil Helene story, it had ended with Yokup going out of the boat and having been the best swimmer alive. But the story can actually be extended a little bit. In this earlier comment, you can have people still in the lifeboat having beer and cold sandwiches, like they're still floating around in the lifeboat. I couldn't agree more. And if the ship sunk, I'd keep a seat for you, Phil. I just want to point to two things that are happening or two sets of things that are happening in this story or in the comments. First of all, people are extending the story. They're extending elements of the story, so they're taking parts of the story, keep going forward. So it's not only that the boat ends, the story ends with them sitting on the water. It's actually the boat keeps going, and you can continue telling the story if you want to. And they're also engaging the moral question creatively. They're also playing and building camaraderie. So the metaphor gives them a chance to play with language and have a go at making their own joke, and also building camaraderie. So talking about, oh, I'm with you, Phil, or I'm against that person. Those are the things that I think are happening in the comments there. It's interesting, though, to me, as we look back at this comment about the stupid cat, flightless bird, the same sort of thing is happening as happened in the parable, where they're switching out elements of it. So where the branches come out, you can put in human garbage. The only point here is that there's no authority with the story, so it doesn't matter that he's changing it out, right? But the same element, the same way of dealing with metaphor as being this thing that you can change out for things that have equal meaning or have a slightly different meaning to make a different point. You can do this with metaphor. And you can change what you're saying or what the meaning of the story is. Sorry, back to these points. I just want to conclude with a couple of main points here. The first one is that discussion occurs around metaphorical language. So the same thing is happening in a parable. The parable is really interesting because it's a story that people can engage with. That's sort of the benefit of metaphor in these situations. Metaphor can also hide and highlight things, but not the same things for the same user. So I kept talking about joking and about sort of the mean things they were saying about Yoka. Really, what Phil says is that Yokup's better off dead, or I wouldn't mind killing Yokup. But he's not saying, Yokup, I'm going to kill you, right? That's a threat. That's a really clear threat to somebody. It's a different thing to say to somebody, I'm going to kill you, as opposed to, if I had to make a choice between a puppy and you, I would choose a puppy. Now, what's the difference? Like, pragmatically, it's the same thing, right? I prefer you to be dead. But its ambiguity sort of hides the threat of it and makes it less clear as to what he's saying. Same purpose or same effect, but done in a different way that allows the person to say, "Oh, I didn't threaten him. Phil didn't threaten him. He just told the story, in which case, or a story in which he chose a puppy over Yoka." Another thing that's interesting about highlighting things is that the Holocaust comes up big for Phil Lane. The other people who are commenting, there's this link between the Holocaust and burning in human garbage. But for Yoka, I think honestly, initially he didn't think about that. It didn't make the same connection for him because it was still in the world of the parable. So you have the world of the parable, which is about gardening. It's not about the Holocaust, it's about gardening. But if you don't have access to that gardening scenario, or you're not thinking about gardening, you're just thinking about burning in human garbage, then maybe you go and think about the Holocaust. It does different things for different people. And also the ambiguity of it can lead to misunderstanding, right? You start switching out these metaphors, and they mean different things for different people, and suddenly the stories are changing, and it's never really clear what anybody's saying about anything. It gets to be really, really confusing. And not only confusing, but if I'm saying one thing and you're saying something else and you have two different meanings on it, and they're ambiguous meanings because they're metaphor, then you can understand why people start to argue with each other, and because they're not being clear in the first place, right? It's all based on it's hiding and highlighting. The metaphor is hiding and highlighting for each particular person. I want to leave it there for right now. I have, if you're interested in reading a little bit more about this, I know you haven't got a copy of these down now, but I'll show you my website at the end so that you can look at this presentation and look at these if you want to. I've written a little bit about the Pope of YouTube, and I have a paper coming out next year that you should be able to see about this if you're interested. But like I said, I'll leave you with my website and my email address. If you have any questions, you're certainly able to ask now. We'll have some dialogue now. But if you'd like to email me, you can go ahead and do that as well. Okay? Thank you all very much. I think we have some time for questions as well. Yeah.
What questions do you have?
Go ahead.
How did you make that presentation? That's my first question.
We use a program called Prezi.com. So if you go to Prezi, you can make the same sort of presentation. It's much easier than it looks. So, yeah.
And do the users that you've studied and wrote about so far, do they know that you've done studies?
Some of them do. I've talked to some of them. Some of them haven't responded to me when I emailed them. Like I said, I wasn't really successful in interviewing people, but for what I'm looking at, it's not really that important for me to have their sort of opinion on what they're saying. When I was talking about ethnography online, I'm really interested in the artifact of the video page and not actually what the person says they think they're doing. I think that's an important question, but I think it's a different question. But yeah, because when you put a video online, it's a kind of text for everyone to see. It's like in legal terms, it's a copyrighted text that you can do anything that you could do with a book. It's the same sort of thing. So that's how I've been treating it. Not as interested in what actually people are saying about what they're doing instead. Go ahead.
How often do you see like successful communication between these two groups where one side actually engages with the other and convinces the other and maybe someone changes their opinion, or is it always people just come to these battles?
Antagonistic, yeah. I don't think that I've ever seen, well, I shouldn't say that. I've seen sometimes where there's positive interaction. So the best example of this is Yoka. He's a very, very strong evangelical fundamentalist Christian, always telling people that they're going to hell, these sorts of things. And there's another user called the Amazing Atheist. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Amazing Atheist. He's a very, very popular YouTube user, especially 2 or 3 years ago. And the Amazing Atheist a while back had a fundraising drive for the New Orleans 9th Ward. And he and Yoka actually met together and made a video together about this charity. And it was a sort of joking video about the two of them, the most hated Christian and the most hated atheist on YouTube getting together. And they were sort of joking about how they disagreed, but when they sat down together, it was funny, Yoka said, it's surprising how much you have in common with someone when you sit down with them. So I think it's, in some element, the YouTube makes it really easy to be adversarial in your interactions, whereas when you're sitting down with somebody, whether or not you're going to say something as strong to them is different, I think. I don't know if that means that it's always bad or always will turn out bad online, but I think that element of sitting down together is really important. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm guessing that maybe people had these types of conversations before YouTube and like chat rooms or something like that. I don't really know, but do you think there's something about like the medium of video? Like I know you study the language mostly, but do you think there's something about the medium of video that sort of changes things?
Well, it's an interesting thing because flaming is the thing that comes before YouTube drama in sort of historical terms. Flaming is when you used to have these email listservs where people would make messages to each other. It's hateful messages, right? And the idea was, because they don't have any social consequences for what they're saying, they're more willing to be hateful with somebody else. I'm trying to think of a historical before the internet where you have a situation where you could do something hateful to somebody and you wouldn't get caught. I'm sure there are really good examples of that I can't think of off the top of my head. As we continue down, if I can think of one, I'll say it. But I think it is that sense of when you don't have the consequence, the immediate consequence, don't do that. Or people saying, oh, you're being mean. I think that's a key element to it. What you said about the video in particular, it's interesting to me when you make a video of yourself, you're not anonymous at all in the way you are if you're just writing text. But you still control how you present the video. So when you sit down with somebody in real life, you still are sort of performing for them, right? You're still being careful about what you say, but you can't go back and cut out something. If you're talking to somebody, you say the wrong thing, you can't go back and edit it out. Whereas this, if you're saying something and you don't want to present that part of you just cut it out. You edit the video a different way. So I think video is moving towards that less anonymous zone, like on Skype, for example, because it's real time. You can't edit it at all. I think that's probably on the other end of the spectrum, as opposed to an email list where you're just an email address. It's not your real name. So I would say that there's probably a spectrum of anonymity. Yeah. Any other questions? You have one?
Yeah, I was just wondering, given the possibilities for miscommunication, why do people defer to metaphor at all? And extrapolating from the length of your research, are there different sorts of metaphors that the evangelicals are using and different ones that the atheists are using? And those metaphors, are they repeated in some ways that help to create that sense of community that you talked about?
The first point is that a metaphor from a linguistic point of view is not something that people necessarily do deliberately. There's this, the history of metaphor research starts with the idea that metaphor is something that we have cognitively, that we think metaphorically, and we aren't even aware of it, right? Up is good, down is bad, right? These sort of things that we say we have sense of she's really I'm trying to think of some good examples, but in a regular turn of speech there, if you just talk long enough, you'll catch yourself using a metaphor. You'll catch yourself using a metaphor, right? All these things, I'm saying them. Yeah, be careful. I've ruined your night. All right. Anyway,
This is why we don't teach linguistics at Wesleyan.
it ruins your night, yeah. But the point is, you use metaphor without thinking about it, right? There's a big argument actually happening right now in metaphor studies. Can you say that somebody has deliberately used a metaphor? And you have on one side that people saying, well, whenever you talk about intent, it's a very sticky subject to say somebody intends to do something. Well, it's what they perceive of what they're trying to do, and what other people perceive of what they're trying to do. So that's sort of the first point, is whether or not they're doing this on purpose or not. The second point about Christians and atheists using different sorts of metaphors is really interesting to me, how much stuff comes from the Bible into the Christian conversation, just naturally. And this bearing fruit thing, right? Bearing good fruit, bearing bad fruit. They talk about it, but they don't even talk about it being a metaphor. It is what it is. Bear fruit. Okay, I understand what that means. It's just something they accept automatically. Now, for the atheists, I think it's a different thing, because atheism is not really a community. Well, in the sense that Christianity is, where you have a core text, and you have this history of community around that core text, that you have this thing that people are drawing on, the same sort of language over time. Whereas atheism, I don't think, has that same history of metaphorical language over time. Whether or not they use the same metaphors, I think in my data set, at least in this limited one, the burning, it seems that the Christians are less likely to make that Holocaust connection than the non-religious people are. And I think that a main reason for that is because it exists in the world of the parable, and the world of the parable is about gardening. And if you don't have that world of the parable, that's not because you're atheistic, it's just because you're not Christian. And that's when you would go and look for some other meaning. So, any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Once one of these videos gets started, and then there's a whole string of responses to it.
Right.
But what is the impetus behind? Is there ever a stated impetus behind the original video? Are these intended as proselytizing videos, or are they sort of? Did the people making them ever say why they're making them?
Why they're doing it? Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Can I, if I can go back a couple of slides ago to this one, to this video. This explains it, sort of what happened. I told you they were arguing initially. Yoka's. This story is really, really interesting. Yoka was not always a Christian. He became a Christian. And his wife also had not always been a Christian. She became a Christian as well, too. The interesting part of it for the people watching them is that his wife used to be a lesbian. And she converted and decided she wasn't a lesbian anymore and married him. And in this argument, Croesusborg, the guy who was arguing with, said, he called his wife a string of bad names that you can imagine based on her history. And that was his impetus to call him human garbage. That's why he was so offended by it. Now, calling someone human garbage is inexcusable, but I think what the other guy did was pretty mean too. From Yoko's point of view, it's a pretty mean thing to do. So the initial part of it was just an insult, I think, saying this guy is not worth anything. I think that was initially an emotional response. But and it would have been fine, I think, if they just both said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have said that. But these things don't tend to go like that, right? Like arguments tend to escalate, right? People don't, after they say bad things in general, unless you're friends. Like, you're friends, you try to make up and continue your friendship. But when you're opposed to somebody, it tends to escalate. You don't tend to say, oh, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. I think that's where, at least in this case, that's where it happened. And because of the way he did it, saying it was from the Bible, it created this whole new kind of argument that was about interpretation of Scripture. But really it started as this sort of thing. Now, as far as just making videos in general, I think Yoka his goal is proselytization. He also makes other kinds of videos. Recently, before he was taken down, he was really interested in competitive barbecue. Are you familiar with
Texas, like that?
He's in Louisiana, actually.
Cool.
Did you know the competitive barbecue? You think it's bad? I go to school in the UK, and I'm trying to explain to my supervisors, two British people, like, about this, and saying, like, although he's not normal in any case. He's not that abnormal. Does that make sense? Like, we have people like this in the States, but we're not all like that. It's really the minority, not the majority. It's funny in watching sort of proselytization videos. Probably everyone here has some experience with it. You understand, you're used to that. But if you take this out of the context, you're going to put it in the UK in a linguistics conference, for example, people kind of go like, "Oh, this is really bizarre," and you kind of always want to go, "Yes, but really not that bizarre. Actually, it's something that people normally do where I come from. But we're not all like that." It's a good question. Yeah.
Does Yokup's wife have a YouTube account? Is she
She
involved
does,
in this?
yes.
Okay.
It's mostly her music.
Oh, okay.
Do you ever like try to figure out or have you thought about what makes people sort of go online and try to sort of with the intent of like putting their personalities and sort of coming up with these sort of communities online, not just revolving around like, an argument, but just like, communities in general. Like there's
It's a big question, yeah. Does anyone play World of Warcraft? Anyone do any sort of Second Life sort of
Willing
stuff?
to admit that you do World of Warcraft?
Yeah, I spent 70 hours this week playing World of Warcraft. I think there's a lot of work done on this sort of thing about whether or not community. First of all, the question was, at the beginning of it, was can community exist online? Which actually asks a bigger question: what is community? What do you mean by community? You have to define that first. And I was initially interested in that in my research, and then I realized that actually I'm not really that interested in what community is. This is a thing that's happening, and people are doing things that are sort of like, almost like physical communities where they're interacting with each other. Why do these people do this? I can only say from my observation of why I think so. I think if you ask them, they would say different things. I think people have different impetuses. I think, for example, Yoka really thinks that it's important for him to share God's love online. God has called him to do that, and this would be his description of it. And as a researcher, as a person, you have to decide, well, do you accept that? Is that okay? Well, it's his perspective of it, but is there another perspective that you could take? Maybe, and this isn't particularly about Yoka or anybody else in this, but maybe your offline life is really not all that fulfilling. You don't get a sense of community from your offline life. But when you go online, you meet people and you go, actually, I really interact well with these people. I was on this trip. I met with one of the atheists in my data set. I met with him yesterday in New York, and he had gone to an atheist meetup. And one of the people who had come to this meetup, YouTube users, had anxiety disorder. So it's bizarre. They had this meetup in New York. Everybody came. He was in his hotel room at the meetup. Right, the meetup's in a different place in the hotel, and he couldn't come to the meetup because he was feeling social anxiety about meeting people. Bizarre, but I think that the internet gives you that for people who are uncomfortable. That could be one reason why you might go to an internet community as opposed to someplace else, or maybe you don't have people around you who are like you, and there's more people online that you can find that are more like you. But I think all of us, everyone has a Facebook account, right? That's a kind of online community. I think we all can see a place online where you interact with people that you enjoy interacting with online and you don't necessarily interact with in real life. At least I can think of that. If you tweet at all. Does anyone tweet? I feel like right. Is there anybody you've met on Twitter who you haven't met in real life and you feel really close to? No?
Not close to, but like appreciate.
You tweet with, right? Yeah, okay. See, I think I've gotten through to you. So. Okay, I guess I do care about people online. Any other questions? Yeah?
Do you have any frustrations with working or like researching from a medium in which like things can just be removed at the drop of a hat?
Yes, Peter and I were just talking about this actually. Yes, there's a couple of ways to get around it. The first one is that I transcribe everything. So once I transcribe it, then even if it's removed, it's still mine. Because transcription is an interesting thing. Somebody says something, you write it down. The thing you wrote down isn't theirs, it's yours. It's your interpretation of what they say. So I have all my transcripts. But yeah, it is frustrating because you can't go back and look at what somebody said. But it makes for really, really interesting videos because this video was only up for maybe a day and a half, and then it was taken down. And the rest of all of this 2 years of discussion happens on people reconstructing this in their language. What did Yokup say? It's really, really interesting, and we do it all the time, right? We do it all the time. Ask you, what did your friend say to you yesterday? You reconstruct what they said, but you don't give like a word-for-word response, right? You had a 5-minute conversation, and you're going to reduce it down to one sentence, right? That's what's happening here. This video was at one time a record, but somebody now has come back and is retelling the story in a new way. And so again, back to Andrew Sopolis' point about things changing over time and needing to watch them over time, the story changes. So the story was one thing on one day, it's the next thing on the next day. And you all know this, and as you gossip about something or there's a rumor, it changes over time. It started off with just a small thing, and it becomes this really, really big thing. So it is frustrating, but it's the way the world works, I think, actually. To expect that there would be a record is, I think, well, even that there is any of these videos that are still up, I think is an interesting thing. That something that somebody said in 2009, you can go watch today and leave a comment on the video if you want to. Any other points, questions? You guys are really good for staying here at 4:15, and it's like dinner time, Peter.
That's why we love our students.
You guys are great. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.